Millionaire finds his maid in the garbage when he discovered the reason he started to cry. The London sky mirrored the steel and glass of the TechVision Tower, a testament to Alexander Sterling's empire. From his top-floor office, the 55-year-old CEO watched the city sprawl beneath him, its lights twinkling like distant stars in the early evening darkness. 25 years of relentless work had transformed his startup into Britain's leading artificial intelligence company, yet something felt hollow in his victory. "Mr. Sterling," his assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. "The sustainability report you requested is ready for review. Send it through, Margaret." He settled into his leather chair, glad for the distraction from his thoughts. The report detailed TechVision's environmental initiatives, including their waste management program. As he scrolled through the document, a security footage still caught his eye, a grainy image of someone going through the company's recycling area after hours. He enlarged the photo, frowning at the timestamp from 2 nights ago. "Margaret, get me Howard from security," he said into the intercom. Minutes later, his head of security entered the office. "About the incident in the recycling area," Howard began. "We've identified the individual. It's one of our cleaning staff, Sarah Anderson. She's been with us for 8 months. Excellent record until now." Alexander leaned back in his chair. "Bring her in tomorrow morning. I'll speak with her personally." After Howard left, Alexander found himself returning to the security image. Something about the woman's posture, the desperate determination in her stance, struck a chord within him. He pulled up her employee file. Sarah Anderson, 28, single mother of 2, living in South London. Her emergency contact was listed as Grace Mitchell, her adoptive mother. The word adoptive made him pause. An old memory stirred, one he'd buried deep. Catherine Mitchell, his university girlfriend, the one who'd disappeared without explanation during their final year at Cambridge. He'd searched for her afterward, but she'd vanished completely, leaving only a brief note saying she needed to find her own path. His hands trembled slightly as he dug deeper into Sarah's background. Born at St. Mary's Hospital, London. Mother's name Catherine Mitchell. Father, unknown. The timing. It couldn't be coincidence. Catherine had vanished in December 1995, and Sarah was born in July 1996. Alexander felt the room spin slightly as the implications hit him. He'd never known why Catherine left, never understood what drove her away. Now, 28 years later, he stared at a photograph of a woman who might be his daughter, caught scavenging through his company's waste. Standing abruptly, he walked to the wall-length window again. The city lights blurred as memories flooded back. Catherine's brilliant mind, her passion for computer science, the innovative ideas they'd shared during late-night study sessions. She'd been more than his girlfriend. She'd been his intellectual equal, challenging his ideas, pushing him to think bigger. His phone buzzed with a message from his current girlfriend, Victoria, asking about their dinner plans at the Savoy. He ignored it. Instead, he found himself opening his laptop, searching through old digital archives of his university days. There, in a grainy photograph from the Cambridge Computer Science Society, he saw Catherine's smile, the same smile he'd noticed in Sarah's employee ID photo. The night deepened around him as he sat in his office, piecing together fragments of the past. He ordered a discreet background check, needing more information before tomorrow's meeting. The preliminary results painted a stark picture. Sarah lived in a small flat in Peckham with her 2 children, ages 6 and 8. Her adoptive mother, Grace Mitchell, Catherine's older sister, had ongoing health issues. Sarah was behind on her rent and had multiple payday loans. Alexander's throat tightened. While he'd built his empire, his own daughter had been struggling mere miles away. The thought of her searching through waste for extra money while he sat in his glass tower made him feel physically ill. "Margaret," he called through the intercom, though it was well past office hours. His assistant, ever dedicated, responded immediately. "Clear my schedule for tomorrow morning. The meeting with Sarah Anderson takes priority." He spent the rest of the evening preparing. If his suspicions were correct, tomorrow would change everything. But he needed to approach this carefully. Sarah wasn't just another employee. She might be the missing piece of a puzzle he hadn't even known he was trying to solve. As midnight approached, Alexander gathered his things to leave. The cleaning staff would be arriving soon for their night shift, and he couldn't bear the thought of possibly crossing paths with Sarah before he was ready. Tomorrow would require all his emotional strength. In the elevator down to the parking garage, he caught his reflection in the polished steel doors. A successful man by all external measures, yet one who might have missed the most important thing in life. The image blurred as the elevator descended, much like the lines between his carefully ordered world and the chaos of newfound possibility. Sarah Anderson's alarm blared at 4:30 a.m., though she'd barely slept. The night shift at Tech Vision had ended just 3 hours ago, but she needed to prepare the kids for school before heading to her morning cleaning job at a local cafe. Her fingers trembled as she checked her phone. Another message from the bank about missed loan payments. The small flat in Peckham was quiet, except for the distant rumble of early morning trains. In the tiny kitchen, Sarah put the kettle on, her reflection in the window showing dark circles under her eyes. At 28, she looked older than her years. Her brunette hair hastily tied back, her work uniform already wrinkled from the night before. "Mum?" Emma, her 8-year-old daughter, appeared in the doorway, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Are you making breakfast?" Sarah forced a smile. "Yes, love. Could you wake your brother? We need to leave early today. I've got that meeting at Tech Vision." The reminder of the meeting made her stomach churn. She'd received the summons yesterday. Mr. Sterling, the CEO himself, wanted to see her. They must have discovered her looking through the recycling area. The thought of losing this job, the best-paying one she had, made her hands shake as she prepared the children's breakfast. "Mummy, can we have eggs?" 6-year-old Oliver asked, shuffling into the kitchen in his Superman pajamas. "Not today, sweetheart. We've got cereal." Sarah kissed the top of his head, hiding her pain. The refrigerator was nearly empty. She'd have to wait until payday to properly stock it again. As the children ate, Sarah checked on her mother in the adjacent room. Grace Mitchell lay sleeping, her breathing labored even with the oxygen assistance. The medical bills had started this spiral of debt, but Sarah couldn't regret it. Grace had raised her after her biological mother passed away during childbirth, loving her as her own. "Your mum would be so proud of you," Grace often said, speaking of Catherine, her younger sister. Sarah had few connections to her biological mother beyond a handful of photos and the stories Grace shared. The only other link was her passion for computers. She'd inherited Catherine's fascination with technology, teaching herself coding in the library after her cleaning shifts. The morning routine was a carefully choreographed dance of getting 2 children dressed, fed, and ready for school, while ensuring Grace had everything she needed. Sarah's neighbor, Mrs. Patel, would look in on her mother during the day, another kindness she could never fully repay. "Emma, don't forget your science project," Sarah called out, helping Oliver with his shoelaces. "And Oliver, it's PE today. Did you pack your kit?" The walk to school took 20 minutes, but Sarah treasured this time with her children. Emma chatted about her upcoming science fair project, a simple computer program she'd created with Sarah's help. Oliver skipped alongside them, stopping to examine every interesting pebble and leaf. "Mum, why can't we have a computer at home?" Emma asked, not for the first time. "Everyone else in my class has one." Sarah swallowed hard. "Soon, love. Maybe for Christmas." The same answer she'd given for the past year. Her daughter's talent for programming was obvious, but Sarah could barely afford the basics, let alone a computer. After dropping the children off, Sarah rushed to the cafe for her morning shift. The owner, Mr. Chen, greeted her with concerned eyes. "Sarah, you look exhausted. Are you sure about working both jobs?" "I'm fine," she insisted, tying on her apron. But her hands shook as she wiped down tables, her mind on the impending meeting at Tech Vision. She'd only been trying to collect scrap metal to sell. The extra $50 would have helped with Oliver's new school shoes. During her break, Sarah studied her reflection in the cafe's bathroom mirror, trying to make herself presentable for the meeting. Her uniform was clean but worn, her face showing the strain of too many sleepless nights. She thought of the gleaming Tech Vision tower where she worked evenings, so different from her daytime world. The cafe's ancient computer caught her eye as she passed the office. Sarah often fixed it for Mr. Chen, her fingers flying over the keyboard with natural skill. Sometimes she dreamed of working with computers properly, of using the knowledge she'd gained through countless late-night online courses. But dreams felt dangerous when reality pressed so hard. "Sarah," Mr. Chen called as she prepared to leave. "Whatever happens at that meeting, you always have a place here." His kindness nearly broke her composure. "Thank you," she managed, gathering her things. She changed into her Tech Vision uniform in the cafe's bathroom, smoothing it as best she could. The journey to central London felt longer than usual. Sarah clutched her bag, containing the few certificates she'd earned from online coding courses. A foolish addition, perhaps, but they gave her courage. Inside were also her children's school photos, reminding her why she couldn't give up, no matter what happened in this meeting. As the Tech Vision Tower came into view, its glass surface reflecting the morning sun, Sarah squared her shoulders. She thought of her mother Catherine, who according to Grace had been brilliant with computers. "You have her mind," Grace always said, "and her spirit." Sarah touched the worn locket at her neck, her only inheritance from Catherine. Inside was a tiny photograph of her mother at university, young and smiling, full of promise. Whatever came next, Sarah would face it with the same determination that had kept her family afloat all these years. The security guard nodded her through, and Sarah stepped into the elevator. As it rose toward the executive floor, her reflection fractured across the mirrored walls. Cleaner, mother, survivor, dreamer. In a few minutes, she would face the man who controlled her future, never suspecting that their meeting would unravel both their carefully constructed worlds. Alexander Sterling stood at his office window, watching the morning sun climb over London's skyline. He hadn't slept, spending the night researching everything he could about Sarah Anderson. The more he discovered, the more certain he became of their connection. Her birth certificate, her mother's background, even her aptitude for technology. It all pointed to an undeniable truth. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. "Mr. Sterling, Sarah Anderson is here," Margaret announced through the intercom. He straightened his tie, trying to calm his racing heart. "Send her in." The door opened and Sarah entered. Alexander's breath caught in his throat. In person, the resemblance to Catherine was striking, the same determined set of her jaw, the same intelligent eyes. She stood awkwardly in her cleaned but worn uniform, clutching a worn bag. "Please sit down." He gestured to the chair across from his desk, noting how she perched on its edge, ready to flee. "Would you like some tea?" "No, thank you, Mr. Sterling." Her voice was steady despite her obvious nervousness. "I understand you wanted to discuss my behavior in the recycling area." "I can explain." "Actually," he interrupted gently, "I'd like to talk about something else first." He opened a folder on his desk, revealing a photograph he'd found in his old university papers. "Do you recognize this woman?" Sarah's eyes widened as she leaned forward. That's my mother, Catherine Mitchell." She touched the locket at her neck unconsciously. "How do you have this picture?" Alexander's fingers trembled slightly as he touched the photograph. "Catherine and I were together at Cambridge. We were both studying computer science. She was brilliant. Revolutionary ideas about artificial intelligence that were years ahead of their time." "Aunt Grace mentioned she was good with computers," Sarah said softly, then caught herself. "But I don't understand what this has to do with—" "Sarah, when was your birthday?" "July 15th, 1996, she answered automatically, confusion crossing her features. Alexander nodded, his suspicions confirmed. "Catherine left Cambridge in December 1995. She never told me why, never said goodbye properly. Just left a note saying she needed to find her own path." He paused, watching understanding slowly dawn in Sarah's eyes. "I tried to find her, but she'd disappeared completely." Sarah stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "What are you saying?" "I think you know," he said quietly. "The timing, the resemblance." "Sarah, I believe I'm your father." The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah gripped the back of her chair, her knuckles white. That's impossible. My father was—" She trailed off, realizing she'd never actually known who her father was. "I've spent the night confirming it," Alexander continued gently. "Your birth certificate lists no father, but the dates align perfectly. And looking at you now, seeing how much you resemble Catherine—" "Stop," Sarah's voice cracked. "Just stop, you can't just— This isn't—" She took a deep breath, straightening her spine. "Mr. Sterling, if this is some kind of strategy to handle the recycling incident—" "This has nothing to do with that," he interrupted, standing. "Sarah, I had no idea Catherine was pregnant when she left. If I had known—" "If you had known what?" Her voice turned sharp. "What would you have done? Swept in with your millions and saved us?" She laughed bitterly. "Do you know what it's like to grow up watching your adoptive mother struggle to make ends meet?" To spend your childhood wondering why your father never wanted you? Alexander felt each word like a physical blow. Sarah, please. No, she cut him off. You don't get to do this. You don't get to suddenly decide to be my father just because you caught me trying to earn extra money from your company's trash. I have managed just fine without a father for 28 years. Have you? He asked quietly, gesturing to her employee file. 3 jobs, payday loans, an ill mother, 2 children to support alone. Sarah's face flushed with anger and shame. How dare you? You've been investigating me. I needed to be sure before having this conversation. He moved around the desk, but stopped when she took a step back. Sarah, I'm not trying to buy you or control you. I just want a chance to know my daughter. I'm not your daughter, she said fiercely. I'm the woman who cleans your offices at night, the woman you were probably planning to fire this morning. That's all. Alexander reached for the folder again, pulling out more documents. These are Catherine's old research papers from university, her theories about neural networks and machine learning. They were revolutionary. Reading them now, I can see how much of TechVision's early success was built on ideas we developed together. He looked at Sarah intently. I hear you're good with computers too. Sarah's hand went to her bag, where her coding certificates lay hidden. That's irrelevant. Is it? Catherine's brilliance, her intuition for technology. I see it in you, Mr. Chen from the cafe tells me you maintain their computer systems. Your daughter's teacher mentioned you helped create a coding program for the science fair. You've been talking to my employers? My children's teachers? Sarah's voice shook with fury. You had no right. You're right, he admitted. I overstepped. But Sarah, please understand. Finding out about you, it changes everything. It changes nothing, she said firmly, though her voice wavered. My children are waiting for me. My mother needs her medication. I have real responsibilities, Mr. Sterling, not some fantasy about long-lost family. At least let me help. I don't want your help. The words exploded from her. I don't want your money or your guilt or your suddenly discovered paternal feelings. What I want is to keep my job, support my family, and leave here with my dignity intact. Alexander fell silent, studying her face. Catherine's determination, his own stubbornness reflected back at him. Finally, he nodded. Your job is secure, Ms. Anderson, and if you ever change your mind about talking, about any of this, my door is open. Sarah straightened her uniform, composing herself. Is that all, Mr. Sterling? Yes, he said softly. That's all, for now. She turned and walked out, her steps quick and precise. Alexander watched her go, seeing in her rigid posture the same pride that had stopped him from begging Catherine to stay all those years ago. But this time he wouldn't let pride win. This time he would find a way to make things right. Sarah barely made it to the ladies' room before her composure cracked. Bracing herself against the marble sink, she stared at her reflection in the ornate mirror. The face looking back at her seemed different somehow, as if the last hour had physically transformed her. Her hands trembled as she opened the locket at her neck, comparing the small photo of Catherine with the image Alexander Sterling had shown her. Miss Anderson. A gentle knock at the door made her jump. It was Margaret, Sterling's assistant. Are you all right? I can call you a taxi if you'd like. I'm fine, Sarah managed, quickly wiping her eyes. Thank you. She checked her watch. Nearly time for her afternoon shift at TechVision. The thought of staying in the building, of possibly running into Alexander Sterling again, made her stomach clench. But she couldn't afford to lose even one shift's wages. Her phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Patel about her mother. Grace keeps asking for you. She seems agitated. Sarah closed her eyes, taking deep breaths. Everyone needed her to be strong to keep going. She couldn't afford the luxury of falling apart. Meanwhile, in his office, Alexander sat motionless behind his desk, staring at Catherine's old photograph. The meeting had gone both better and worse than he'd imagined. Sarah's fierce independence, her instant rejection of any help, it was exactly what he should have expected from Catherine's daughter. His daughter. Sir? Margaret's voice came through the intercom. The board is waiting for the quarterly strategy meeting. Cancel it, he said, then reconsidered. No, wait, move it to tomorrow. And Margaret? I need you to gather everything we have on our employee welfare programs. Benefits, wages, working conditions, everything. He pulled up the company's organizational chart on his computer. The cleaning staff were technically employed through an external contractor. No wonder their wages were so low. His jaw clenched as he thought of Sarah working multiple jobs just to survive while he sat in his glass tower. In the staff break room, Sarah changed into her cleaning uniform, trying to ignore the curious glances from her co-workers. News of her meeting with the CEO had already spread. She picked up her cleaning cart, forcing herself to focus on the familiar routine. Sarah Linda, her supervisor, hurried over. "Everything okay? When Howard said Sterling wanted to see you, we were all worried." "It's fine," Sarah said automatically. "Just a misunderstanding about the recycling area." "Well, thank goodness for that. Though I heard something strange. Apparently, Sterling's cancelled all his meetings for tomorrow." "Never does that one?" Sarah's hands stilled on her cart. She thought of the way he'd looked at her, the tremor in his voice when he'd shown her Catherine's photograph. No, she couldn't think about that now. The afternoon passed in a blur. Sarah cleaned offices mechanically, her mind racing. Every reflective surface seemed to taunt her with fragments of her own face, features she'd never questioned before suddenly seeming foreign. Did she have his eyes, his determination? She thought of Emma's natural aptitude for computers, of Oliver's quick mind, traits that might have come from not one but both sides of her heritage. In his office, Alexander was making calls. "I want a complete audit of our contractor relationships," he told his head of HR, particularly focusing on wage disparity between direct employees and contracted staff. He paused, looking at the staff photos on his computer. "And get me information about our educational support programs. Do we offer anything for employees' children?" The HR director seemed startled. "Well, no, sir. Not for contracted staff, certainly. But if you're thinking of implementing something, draw up a proposal, make it comprehensive. I want options on my desk by next week." As evening approached, Sarah received another text, this time from Emma. "Mum, can you help with my computer project tonight? It's not working right." The message made her throat tight. She thought of Alexander's words about Catherine's brilliant mind, about inherited talents. What else had her mother passed on to her? What else might she pass on to her own children? In the executive bathroom, Alexander loosened his tie, studying his own reflection. He'd spent decades building tech vision, focusing on innovation and growth. How had he never noticed the inequality in his own building? The thought of Sarah cleaning these offices at night, while he attended black tie functions, made him feel physically ill. His phone buzzed. Victoria again. "Darling, you've been impossible to reach all day. The charity gala committee needs your input." "Not now, Victoria," he replied tersely. Something's come up. He found himself walking the office floors, paying attention to details he'd never noticed before. The cleaning staff worked efficiently, invisibly, just as they were meant to. How many other stories had he missed? How many other lives had he failed to see? Sarah was cleaning the conference room when she felt his presence. Looking up, she saw Alexander Sterling standing in the doorway, his expression uncertain. "Miss Anderson," he said formally. "I wondered if we might talk again." "I'm working, Mr. Sterling," she replied, continuing to wipe down the table. "I know. That's part of what I wanted to discuss." He stepped into the room, careful to maintain his distance. "I've been thinking about our company policies, about how we treat our staff, all our staff." Sarah straightened, meeting his eyes. "With all due respect, sir, I don't need your guilt to manifest as corporate policy changes." "This isn't about guilt, Sarah. It's about responsibility, about legacy." He glanced at the framed photos on the wall, TechVision's history, its milestones. "Your mother helped build the foundation of this company's success. Her ideas, her brilliance, I've built on them for years without even realizing." He trailed off, then squared his shoulders. "I can't change the past, but I can change how we move forward." For a moment, neither spoke. The evening light cast long shadows across the conference room, highlighting the vast distance between them. Employer and employee, privileged and struggling, father and daughter. Yet, in their shared silence, something shifted, like the first tremor before an earthquake. Finally, Sarah spoke. "I have to finish my shift. My children are waiting." Alexander nodded, accepting the boundary she'd drawn, but as he turned to leave, he paused. "Catherine would be proud of you, you know. Not because of me or any of this, but because of who you are, the mother you've become, the strength you've shown." Sarah's hands tightened on her cleaning cloth, but she said nothing. After he left, She found herself looking at her reflection in the conference room window, seeing for the first time not just who she was, but who she might become. The emergency board meeting caught everyone by surprise. 2 weeks after his discovery, Alexander Sterling stood before TechVision's board of directors, his presentation displayed on the wall-length screen behind him. "Our current contractor policies are not just outdated," he declared, clicking through slides filled with data. "They're morally indefensible. The wage disparity between our direct employees and contracted staff is staggering. Today, we're going to change that." "The shareholders," Alexander interrupted, "have benefited from record profits for the past decade, profits built on the backs of underpaid workers." He paused, controlling his emotion. "And there's something else the board needs to know. I've been reviewing our early patents, our fundamental AI algorithms. It appears some of our core technology was developed in collaboration with an uncredited researcher, Catherine Mitchell." A murmur ran through the room. Alexander clicked to the next slide, showing Catherine's old research papers. Ms. Mitchell's work on neural networks was revolutionary. Work that, I'm ashamed to admit, I built upon without properly acknowledging her contributions. Meanwhile, across London, Sarah sat in her small kitchen, staring at an official-looking envelope from TechVision. Inside was a letter announcing company-wide changes. All contracted staff would be brought in-house, with full benefits and significantly higher wages. Additionally, a new educational support program would provide technology resources and training opportunities for employees and their families. "Mum, look, he said he got a new one from some corporate program." Sarah's hands trembled as she examined the laptop. Brand new, still in its original packaging, with a TechVision logo discreetly embossed on the lid. A note attached read, "For small businesses upgrading their technology. Please pass the old equipment to someone who could use it. IT Support Division." Her phone buzzed with a message from Linda. "Sarah, have you seen the announcement? They're making us all direct employees." Back in the boardroom, Alexander faced growing resistance. "This is unprecedented," Patricia Hamilton, the CFO, protested. "Completely restructuring our workforce, establishing educational programs, acknowledging potential intellectual property issues from decades ago. It's the right thing to do," Alexander stated firmly. "And it's just the beginning. I'm establishing a foundation in Catherine Mitchell's name to support women in technology. We'll provide scholarships, mentoring programs." "Alexander," Richard interrupted, "you need to help us understand. Why this sudden focus on corporate responsibility? Why now?" Alexander paused, considering his words carefully. "Because I recently discovered something that made me reevaluate everything. Our company's success, our responsibility to our workers, our legacy." He straightened his shoulders. "Catherine Mitchell didn't just contribute to our early technology. She was also the mother of my daughter." Shocked silence filled the room. Alexander continued, his voice steady. "A daughter I never knew existed. A daughter who until 2 weeks ago was cleaning our offices at night while raising 2 children alone. If that doesn't make you question our corporate practices, I don't know what will." In Peckham, Sarah helped Emma set up her new laptop, watching her daughter's eyes light up as she explored the programming software. Oliver peered over their shoulders, asking endless questions about how computers worked. "Mum," Emma said suddenly, "is it true what Kelly said, that you had a meeting with the big boss?" Sarah's hands stilled on the keyboard. "Yes, I did. Is that why things are changing?" "Mrs. Turner at school said they're starting a special computer class, and we're all getting tablets." Before Sarah could respond, her phone rang. Grace's doctor. The specialist appointment they'd been waiting months for had suddenly been moved up. Apparently, the hospital received a donation specifically for expanding their respiratory care unit, the doctor explained. "We can see your mother next week." Sarah sat heavily in her chair, overwhelmed by the ripples of change spreading through her life. Part of her wanted to reject it all, the help, the opportunities, the implied apology in every corporate announcement. But looking at Emma's excited face as she typed her first lines of code, Sarah felt something shift inside her. In his office, Alexander ended another long day of meetings. The changes he'd set in motion were causing upheaval throughout the company, but for the first time in years, he felt truly purposeful. His phone showed missed calls from Victoria. She'd been increasingly frustrated by his distraction, his sudden disinterest in their usual social circuit. A knock at his door revealed Margaret. "Sir, there's someone here to see you." She paused. "It's Miss Anderson." Sarah stood in the doorway, her posture tense but determined. "Mr. Sterling, I wanted to talk about these changes. Please come in." He gestured to a chair, noticing she seemed different, still cautious but less defensive. "I hope you understand, none of this is meant to pressure you." "I know," she said quietly. "That's why I'm here." She placed a folder on his desk, her certificates in computer programming, coding courses she'd completed online. "Emma, my daughter, she has Catherine's gift for technology. I see it every time she touches a computer. And now, with these new programs you're implementing, she'll have opportunities you didn't," Alexander finished softly. Sarah nodded, blinking back tears. "I'm not ready for everything, the personal stuff, but I think maybe we could start with this." She gestured to her certificates. "The company's new training program. If that offer is real, I'd like to apply." Alexander felt his throat tighten. "Of course. Though, given your experience," he picked up her certificates, examining them with genuine interest, "we might need to create a more advanced track." For the first time since they'd met, Sarah smiled. A small, hesitant thing, but genuine. "I'd like that." Outside the office windows, London's lights began to twinkle on, the city transforming as day shifted to evening. Inside, father and daughter began a careful conversation about technology, about opportunity, about the future, building a bridge between their worlds, one careful step at a time. The executive conference room crackled with tension. Richard Blackwood paced before a group of senior executives, his normally composed demeanor showing signs of strain. Alexander's changes are destabilizing the company. The shareholders are nervous, and frankly, so am I. Patricia Hamilton, the CFO, nodded in agreement. The costs of bringing all contracted staff in-house, the new educational programs, this Mitchell Foundation he's creating, it's affecting our quarterly projections significantly. And now he's fast-tracking some cleaner into the IT department? Richard scoffed. It's completely inappropriate. The board needs to take action before this gets even more out of hand. In the IT department's training room, Sarah sat before a computer, her fingers flying over the keyboard as she completed her technical assessment. The department head, James Chen, no relation to her cafe employer, watched with poorly concealed surprise as she breezed through advanced programming challenges. "Ms. Anderson," he said, reviewing her results, "these scores are exceptional. You've clearly been studying well beyond basic programming." "I had a lot of late nights," Sarah replied quietly, thinking of hours spent in libraries, learning while her children did their homework. A knock at the door interrupted them. It was Margaret, looking apologetic. "Ms. Anderson, Mr. Sterling asked if you could join the executive meeting. There are some concerns being raised." Sarah's stomach clenched, but she straightened her spine. Her new business attire, purchased with her improved salary, felt like armor as she followed Margaret to the executive floor. Inside his office, Alexander was reviewing Catherine's old research papers when the call came from Richard. "The board is convening an emergency session. Your recent decisions need review." "My recent decisions," Alexander replied coolly, "are finally aligning this company with its original values." He glanced at Catherine's papers, at the brilliant ideas that had helped build TechVision's foundation. "I'll be there in 10 minutes." In the elevator, Sarah tried to calm her racing heart. She'd known there would be resistance to her presence in the IT department, but she hadn't expected to be summoned to an executive meeting so soon. The doors opened to reveal Alexander waiting. "I'm sorry about this," he said quietly, "but I think it's important they hear from you directly." "Hear what?" Sarah asked, her voice tense. "That I'm your long-lost daughter. That's hardly going to help my credibility." "No," he replied, surprising her. "They need to hear your ideas, the same brilliant insight Catherine had. I see it in you. You just needed the opportunity to develop it." The executive conference room fell silent as they entered. Richard's expression darkened at Sarah's presence, but Alexander spoke before anyone could object. "Ms. Anderson has just completed her technical assessment for the IT department," he announced. "James, would you share her results?" James Chen pulled up the scores on the room's display. "The highest marks we've seen in 5 years of recruiting. Particularly impressive in AI architecture and neural network design." "Convenient," Richard muttered, but Patricia Hamilton leaned forward, studying the results with professional interest. "Ms. Anderson," she said, "these solutions to our legacy code problems, they're quite innovative. Where did you learn to approach systems this way?" Sarah swallowed hard, then lifted her chin. "I taught myself mostly, studying online between shifts, practicing on old computers at the library. When I cleaned offices at night, I'd sometimes look at the code left up on screens." She paused. "I started noticing patterns, ways to make things more efficient." "You studied our proprietary code while cleaning?" Richard's voice was sharp. "I studied everything I could find," Sarah corrected him, "because I love understanding how systems work, how to make them better, just like my mother did." A heavy silence fell at the mention of Catherine. Alexander stepped forward. "Sarah has already identified several critical improvements to our current systems. Improvements that could save the company millions in processing efficiency." "That's not the point," Richard interrupted. "The point is, you're letting personal matters cloud your judgment. These radical changes, this sudden promotion of a cleaning staff member—" "My judgment?" Alexander's voice was quiet but intense. "My judgment built this company into what it is today. And yes, I've made mistakes, including not recognizing the contributions of brilliant people like Catherine Mitchell. I won't make that mistake again." Patricia Hamilton was still studying Sarah's technical solutions. "These improvements to our neural network architecture, they're remarkably similar to our original breakthrough algorithms." She looked up sharply. "The ones from Catherine Mitchell's era." "Because they're based on the same fundamental understanding," Sarah said, finding her voice. "I didn't know it until recently, but I think I see systems the way she did, and I want to make them better, not just for profit, but for people." She gestured to the company data displayed on the screen. "Your current efficiency metrics show bottlenecks in data processing that affect everyone, from customer service to payroll. I can fix that." The room was silent as executives studied the diagrams and code she'd created. Even Richard seemed momentarily lost for arguments. "I suggest," Alexander said into the silence, "that we give Ms. Anderson 3 months to implement her improvements. If they don't deliver the projected efficiency gains, we can re-evaluate all recent changes." Patricia nodded slowly. "That seems reasonable, though the board will want regular progress reports." "Of course," Sarah agreed, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I welcome the scrutiny." As the meeting dispersed, Sarah remained behind, staring at her code displayed on the massive screen. Alexander stood beside her, both of them silent for a moment. "You know they'll be watching for any mistake," she said finally. "Yes," he agreed, "just like they watched me in the early days. Just like they watched Catherine." He turned to face her. "But you have something neither of us had back then." "What's that?" "Support," he said simply. "You don't have to do this alone." Sarah thought of Emma's excitement over her new laptop, of Oliver's proud face when she'd helped his class with their first coding lesson, of Grace's tears of joy at her improved medical care. The changes in her life were overwhelming, frightening, but for the first time they also felt possible. 3 months, she said, squaring her shoulders. "I'll show them what Mitchell women can do." Alexander smiled, recognizing Catherine's determination in their daughter's stance. Outside the window, London stretched before them, a network of lights and connections, much like the systems they both understood so well, complex but full of possibility. Sarah's new office in the IT department still felt surreal. A month into her 3-month trial period, she'd transformed the small space into a combination of work area and family corner. Emma's science fair certificate hung next to her computer science credentials, while Oliver's colorful drawings brightened the walls. On her desk, a framed photo of Grace sat beside her terminal. "The neural network optimization is ready for testing," she announced to the development team gathered around her workstation. "If my calculations are correct, this should reduce processing time by 40%. James Chen nodded approvingly. "The preliminary results are promising, though Richard Blackwood has requested another progress review next week." "Of course he has," Sarah murmured, running her hands through her hair, a gesture unconsciously mirroring Alexander's own habit. The past month had been a whirlwind of coding, learning, and proving herself. Every success was scrutinized, every minor setback magnified by watchful eyes. Later that afternoon, as she delved deep into the company's legacy code, something caught her attention. Buried in the original AI architecture were elegant solutions she recognized, not from her studies, but from her own intuitive understanding of systems. It was like finding echoes of her own thoughts, written years before she was born. "Those are Catherine's algorithms." Alexander's voice came from her doorway. "I always knew they were brilliant, but I never fully understood them until I saw you working with them." Sarah didn't look up from her screen. Their relationship remained professional but tentative, each interaction carefully balanced between employer and employee, father and daughter. "They're beautiful," she said softly. "The way she structured the data flow, it's exactly how I would have done it." "Sarah," he hesitated, then continued, "I found something in the archives. Would you like to see it?" In his office, Alexander pulled out a dusty box of old development materials. These were from our university days. Catherine's original notebooks, her design documentation. He paused, pulling out a small leather-bound journal. "And this." Sarah took the journal with trembling hands. Inside, in neat handwriting, were not just technical notes, but personal thoughts. Her mother's words preserved in time. "October 15, 1995, she read aloud. "The neural network implementation is finally working. Alex doesn't see it yet, but this architecture could revolutionize how AI systems learn. Sometimes I think the baby inside me already understands computers. My best ideas come at 3 a.m. when she's most active." Sarah's voice broke. She'd known about the pregnancy, of course, but seeing her mother's words, knowing she'd been thought of, loved even before birth. A knock interrupted the moment. It was Patricia Hamilton. "Sorry to disturb you, but we need to discuss the Mitchell Foundation launch. And Sarah, your team reported an unusual pattern in the latest system tests." Back in her office, Sarah studied the test results while Patricia explained the Foundation's plans. The numbers blurred before her eyes as she thought of her mother's journal, of legacy code and inherited gifts. "These patterns," she said suddenly, interrupting Patricia's Foundation discussion, "they're not errors. The system is evolving exactly as my mother predicted in her original design. Look." She pulled up Catherine's old documentation alongside her current implementation. "She built in capacity for growth we're only now beginning to utilize." Patricia leaned forward, her CFO's mind quickly grasping the implications. "If you're right, this could mean a quantum leap in our AI capabilities," Sarah finished. "We don't need to optimize the old architecture. We need to fully implement what she originally designed." The next few days passed in a blur of coding and testing. Sarah worked late into the night, her fingers flying over the keyboard as she unraveled her mother's vision. During breaks, she read more of Catherine's journal, feeling a deepening connection to the brilliant woman who'd given her life. Emma and Oliver spent these evenings in the office with her, doing homework or playing educational games on their new laptops. The sight of them, absorbed in technology, fearlessly exploring and learning, made her heart swell. "Mum," Emma asked one evening, "was Grandmother Catherine really as smart as everyone says?" Sarah smiled, showing her daughter the elegant code on her screen. "Even smarter. See these patterns? She designed them before most people even understood what AI could do. Like you do now." Emma's eyes shone with pride. "I'm just building on her foundation," Sarah replied. But Alexander, passing by, stopped in the doorway. "You're doing more than that," he said quietly. "You're fulfilling her vision and creating your own." The next week's progress review was different from the others. Instead of defending her work, Sarah demonstrated how Catherine's original architecture, fully implemented, could transform the company's entire system. "Not unprecedented," Sarah corrected him. "Just previously unrealized. My mother designed this capability into the original system. I simply helped it grow into what it was meant to be." Later, alone in her office, Sarah read more of Catherine's journal. One entry made her pause. December 1st, 1995. "Alex is brilliant, but he sees technology as a tool for success. I see it as a way to make lives better. My baby deserves a world where innovation serves humanity, not just profit margins." She looked up to find Alexander in her doorway again. "You've been reading more of her journal?" Sarah nodded. She had such clear vision, not just for the technology, but for its purpose. She hesitated, then continued. "The Mitchell Foundation, what exactly do you envision it doing?" "That depends," he replied carefully. "What do you think it should do?" For the first time, Sarah fully met his gaze. I think it should do what she wanted, use technology to make lives better, starting with the communities that need it most. Alexander smiled, seeing Catherine's idealism and his own drive combined in their daughter's determined expression. Then let's make it happen. Together. Outside her office window, the sun was setting over London, casting long shadows across the city. But inside Tech Vision, new light was growing. In revolutionary code, in family connections, in dreams finally taking flight. The community centre in South London buzzed with excitement. Rows of new computers lined the walls, each one bearing the discreet Mitchell Foundation logo. Sarah stood before a group of eager students, many from backgrounds similar to her own. Technology isn't just for people in glass towers, she told them, catching Alexander's eye at the back of the room. It's for anyone with the passion to learn and the determination to create. It was the Foundation's first initiative, converting old community centres into tech hubs, providing free coding classes and computer access to underserved neighbourhoods. Emma and Oliver sat among the students, helping younger children navigate their first programming lessons. Ms. Anderson, a teenage girl, raised her hand. Is it true you started as a cleaner? My mum's a cleaner too, and she says I should focus on more realistic goals. Sarah smiled, remembering her own doubts. 2 months ago, I was working 3 jobs to support my family. Now I'm heading the AI optimization project at Tech Vision. She paused, looking at her children. Dreams aren't unrealistic if you have the right opportunities and support. After the class, Alexander helped pack up equipment. These moments of practical collaboration had become their way of building bridges, easier than direct conversations about their relationship. You're good with them, he observed, watching her demonstrate a coding concept to a lingering student. Catherine would have loved this. I found something else in her journal, Sarah said quietly once the student left. Notes about a group of interns who worked with her on the original AI architecture. There are references to breakthrough ideas they developed together. Alexander frowned. I don't remember any interns from that period. Exactly. Sarah pulled out photocopied journal pages. They were all young women from non-traditional backgrounds. Catherine was unofficially mentoring them, giving them chances nobody else would. Before Alexander could respond, his phone buzzed. Richard Blackwood was calling an emergency board meeting. Again. Back at Tech Vision Tower, the executive floor was tense. Patricia Hamilton met them before the meeting, her expression worried. Richard's been digging into the old records. He's questioning the legitimacy of some early patents. Inside the boardroom, Richard stood before a display of historical company documents. These patent applications, he announced as Sarah and Alexander entered, were filed solely under Tech Vision's name. If there were other contributors, as Ms. Anderson suggests, it could expose us to significant liability. Those contributors, Sarah said firmly, were young women my mother believed in, women who, like me, just needed a chance to prove themselves. And what proof do you have of their contributions? Richard challenged. Besides convenient journal entries that suddenly appeared. Actually, a new voice spoke from the doorway. I have proof. Everyone turned to see James Chen holding a stack of old backup tapes. In preparing for the system upgrade, we found archived development logs from 1995. They show multiple users contributing to the core architecture. Sarah's hands flew over a keyboard, bringing up the restored data. There, in lines of legacy code, was evidence of brilliant minds working together, Catherine and her team of unofficial interns, their innovations woven into Tech Vision's foundation. These women, Sarah said softly, many from immigrant families or underprivileged backgrounds, helped build the technology that made this company successful, and then they disappeared from the record. Alexander studied the code, recognition dawning. I remember now. Catherine kept pushing to hire them formally to give them credit. The board at the time, he glanced at Richard, thought it would complicate our initial public offering. That was a different time, Richard said defensively. Yes, Sarah agreed. It was, and now we have a chance to make it right. She pulled up the Mitchell Foundation's mission statement. The foundation isn't just about teaching coding. It's about acknowledging and supporting hidden talent, about ensuring innovation doesn't just come from privileged places. Patricia Hamilton leaned forward. The positive PR from acknowledging and making amends for past oversight could actually benefit the company, especially with the current focus on diversity in tech. This isn't about PR, Alexander said firmly. It's about justice. About legacy. He turned to Sarah. Can you find these women? She nodded. I've already started. Several went on to work in technology elsewhere, though never reaching the positions they deserved. One runs a small computer repair shop in Manchester. Another teaches math in Birmingham. The Foundation's next initiative, Alexander announced to the board, will be establishing a fund to recognize and compensate these early contributors. And we'll create a permanent program to identify and support similar hidden talent. The shareholders, Alexander interrupted, will understand that TechVision's future depends on embracing all forms of innovation, from all sources. He gestured to Sarah. Look what we almost missed because of old prejudices and narrow thinking. After the meeting, Sarah and Alexander stood in her office, looking at the community center photos she'd hung on her wall. Emma had captured candid shots of students learning, their faces bright with possibility. I've been thinking, Sarah said carefully, about expanding the Foundation's reach. Not just technology education, but support for working parents, childcare programs, healthcare assistance. She trailed off, thinking of her own struggles. Alexander watched her, seeing Catherine's compassion and vision in their daughter's dreams. You should run it, he said suddenly. What? The Foundation. You understand both worlds, corporate technology and community needs. You've lived the challenges these families face. He paused. And you have your mother's heart for helping others. Sarah touched Catherine's journal on her desk. I'll need help, guidance. You'll have it, he promised. But Sarah, you're already proving you know how to build bridges between worlds. Just look at what you've accomplished here. Through her office window, they could see the London skyline, the same view that had once emphasized their differences, now highlighting their shared vision. On her desk, Emma's latest coding project blinked on the screen, a simple program to help organize the community center's classes. Catherine wrote something else in her journal, Sarah said softly. Technology is just a tool. It's the hands that guide it, the hearts that direct it, that make it matter. Alexander nodded, emotion thick in his throat. Together, they watched the sun set over their changing city, its light touching glass towers and community centers alike, illuminating new possibilities in every direction. The Mitchell Foundation's launch event transformed TechVision's austere lobby into a celebration of diversity and innovation. Screens displayed photographs of Catherine and her forgotten team of interns, alongside images from the new community tech centers. Among the crowd of executives and media, children from the South London Centre demonstrated their coding projects. Sarah stood at the podium, her professional attire a far cry from her cleaning uniform just months ago. The Mitchell Foundation isn't just about technology, she addressed the assembled crowd. It's about recognition, about ensuring that brilliant minds aren't overlooked because of their circumstances. In the front row, Grace sat in her wheelchair, tears streaming down her face as she watched her adopted daughter speak. Besides her, Emma and Oliver beamed with pride. Alexander stood at the back, observing the scene with quiet satisfaction. Victoria, his now ex-girlfriend, cornered him after the speech. Really, Alexander? Putting your illegitimate daughter in charge of a multi-million-pound foundation? The social circle is buzzing with gossip. Let them buzz, he replied calmly. Sarah's exactly where she should be. The following weeks brought whirlwind changes. Sarah split her time between the foundation and her AI development work while managing her growing family responsibilities. Grace's health had improved with better care, but she still needed regular attention. One evening, as Sarah worked late in her office, Emma burst in excitedly. Mom! She demonstrated a simple app she'd created to help Oliver with his homework. That's brilliant, sweetheart. Sarah examined the code, recognizing patterns similar to Catherine's style. You've got a natural talent for this, just like you and grandmother Catherine, Emma said proudly. Then hesitantly, Mum, is it okay if I call Mr. Sterling Grandpa now? Oliver already does when he visits the office. Sarah's hands stilled on the keyboard. Her relationship with Alexander had grown more comfortable, but they'd never discussed family titles. Before she could respond, a knock interrupted them. James Chen entered, looking concerned. Sarah, we've got a situation. Someone leaked details about the early patent issues to the tech press. They're running stories about TechVision's hidden history of overlooking minority contributors. Sarah quickly pulled up the news coverage. The stories weren't entirely negative. Many praised the company's current efforts to make amends, but the timing was delicate. The foundation was just beginning to implement its broader initiatives. "There's more," James added reluctantly. "Richard Blackwood is suggesting to the board that your appointment to head the foundation might appear as nepotism, given recent revelations about your relationship with Alexander." Sarah felt a familiar pressure building behind her eyes. Emma, sensing tension, quietly gathered her things. "I'll take Oliver to Mrs. Patel's," she said, showing maturity beyond her years. After the children left, Sarah found herself in Alexander's office. He was already handling damage control, speaking firmly to reporters on the phone. The Mitchell Foundation's leadership was chosen based on merit and vision, not family connections. When he hung up, Sarah spoke. "Maybe Richard's right. Maybe I should step back." "Absolutely not," Alexander interrupted. "You've earned this position. Your work with the AI systems, your vision for the foundation, your connection with the communities we're trying to reach, none of that has anything to do with our relationship." "Doesn't it?" Sarah challenged. "Would you have looked twice at my ideas if you hadn't discovered I was your daughter?" "I would have missed them entirely," he admitted quietly. "Just like I missed Catherine's interns, missed so many opportunities to do things differently. That's exactly why you need to stay. You see what I can't." Their conversation was interrupted by Patricia Hamilton. "Sorry to intrude, but you both need to see this." She handed them her tablet, displaying social media reactions to the leaked stories. To their surprise, many of the top comments came from tech industry workers, sharing similar experiences of being overlooked. "It's trending," Patricia explained. "People are using Mitchell Foundation to share their own stories. The narrative is shifting. Instead of a scandal about past wrongs, it's becoming a conversation about systemic change." Sarah studied the responses, an idea forming. "Then let's join that conversation." She turned to Alexander. "The Foundation's next initiative. What if we created a platform for people to share their experiences and connect with mentors, not just in technology, but in any field where talented people face barriers?" Alexander smiled, recognizing Catherine's innovative spirit in their daughter's ability to turn challenges into opportunities. "What do you need?" "Support from the board to expand our scope and—" She hesitated, then continued firmly. "I want to bring in some of Catherine's original team as foundation advisors. They understand better than anyone what we're trying to achieve." Later that evening, Sarah found herself back in her office, looking at the family corner she'd created. She added a new photo, one from the launch event, showing 3 generations of her family together. Grace, who'd given her a home, Catherine, whose legacy she carried, and now Alexander, bridging past and future. Emma's coding project still blinked on her screen, a simple solution created with pure intention. Sarah thought of her daughter's question about calling Alexander Grandpa, of Oliver's easy acceptance of family changes, of her own evolving understanding of belonging. Her phone buzzed with a message from Alexander. "Board meeting tomorrow. They're expecting the Foundation's expanded proposal, ready to change the world." Sarah smiled, touching Catherine's journal. "More than ready," she typed back. Then, after a moment, "Dad." Through her window, she could see lights coming on across London, each one representing stories and dreams as yet untold. The Mitchell Foundation would help tell those stories, would help bridge the gaps between ability and opportunity, between past wounds and future healing. Her computer chimed with new social media notifications, more voices joining the conversation, more bridges waiting to be built. Sarah squared her shoulders and got back to work. Her mother's journal open beside her, her father's support behind her, and her own path finally clear before her. 3 months after the Foundation's launch, Sarah supervised the opening of their 10th Community Tech Center. This one, located in Birmingham, held special significance. It was where they'd found Janet Chen, one of Catherine's original interns, teaching mathematics at a local school. "It's exactly what Catherine dreamed of," Janet said, walking through the newly equipped facility. "She always said technology should be a bridge, not a barrier." She paused before a wall displaying Catherine's photograph, though she never got to see it happen. Sarah touched her mother's locket, a habit she'd developed when thinking deeply. "Tell me more about working with her. The journals only say so much." Janet's eyes grew distant with memory. "We'd work late into the night, this brilliant group of misfits she'd gathered, Catherine would bring us tea and listen to our ideas like they mattered. Back then that was revolutionary. Someone with her credentials treating immigrant kids and scholarship students as equals. Alexander, who'd been quietly observing the center's setup, joined them. I remember those late nights, but I never knew. I thought she was just working alone. That was deliberate, Janet replied, a hint of old pain in her voice. Catherine protected us. She knew the board wouldn't understand her methods, her belief in collaborative innovation. So she gave us secure access to the development servers, let us work under her credentials. Sarah's technical mind caught something in that statement. Under her credentials? So all your work would have been logged under her user account? Janet nodded. She set up special permissions, hidden folders where we could store our work safely. Said someday the world would be ready to know the truth. Sarah and Alexander exchanged looks. Those folders might still exist in the archived systems, Sarah said slowly, deep in the legacy servers. Back at TechVision Tower, Sarah assembled a small team including James Chen and two of Catherine's former interns who'd joined the foundation as advisors. They began a systematic search of the old server architecture. Emma and Oliver camped out in her office, doing homework while the adults worked. Grace had been moved to a comfortable chair, insisting on being present for what might be discovered about her sister's work. "Mum, look at this," Emma called out, studying one of the archived directory structures displayed on Sarah's screen. "It's like a puzzle. See how the permissions are nested?" Sarah leaned over her daughter's shoulder, impressed. "You're right, it's almost like—" She trailed off, remembering something from Catherine's journal. Quickly, she pulled up an entry from December 1995. "Created a safe space today, hidden in plain sight. Like the gardens we played in as children, Grace. Secret paths only we knew. Aunt Grace," Sarah turned to her adoptive mother, "did you and Catherine have a special place when you were young?" Grace's eyes lit up. "The maze garden at our grandparents' house. We had a secret way of marking the correct path. 3 steps forward, 1 step back." Sarah's fingers flew over the keyboard, applying this pattern to the directory structure. Suddenly, new folders appeared, protected by encryption but clearly preserved all these years. "It's here," she breathed. "Everything they worked on, every innovation, every breakthrough." She looked up at Alexander. "This isn't just documentation of their contributions. This is proof that some of TechVision's most fundamental patents came from collaborative work." The room fell silent as they began exploring the contents. Hours of work were preserved in meticulous detail. Catherine's guidance, her team's innovations, all carefully documented and dated. "She was building more than an AI architecture," Alexander said softly, reading through the files. "She was creating a model for inclusive innovation, proving that breakthrough ideas can come from anywhere." Janet wiped tears from her eyes as she recognized her own early work. She always said the future belonged to everyone, not just those born to privilege. That true innovation requires diverse perspectives. As evening fell, the team ordered takeaway, spreading documents and data across multiple screens. Oliver had fallen asleep on the office couch, while Emma continued studying the old code with fascination. "The Foundation can't just acknowledge this history," Sarah said finally, looking around at her gathered family, biological and chosen. "We need to embody it. Everything we're doing now, the community centers, the mentorship programs, it's all an extension of what Catherine started." Alexander nodded, watching Emma help Janet analyze some old algorithms. "We'll need to revise quite a few patents, acknowledge quite a few contributors. It might affect the company's value," Sarah acknowledged. "Some shareholders won't be happy." "The company's real value," Alexander replied, "was never just in its patents. It's in its potential to transform lives." Catherine understood that. Now we do too. Grace wheeled herself closer to the screens displaying her sister's work. "Catherine would be so proud," she said softly. "Not just of what you've discovered, but of what you're building together." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes as she looked around the room, her children embracing their heritage of innovation, her father finally understanding the full scope of Catherine's vision, her mother's forgotten colleagues reclaiming their place in history. "Mum," Emma called out, "I think I found something else. Look at these notes about future applications. Grandmother Catherine predicted technologies we're only just developing now." As they gathered around Emma's discovery, Sarah felt a deep sense of rightness. They were more than just uncovering the past. They were building the future Catherine had envisioned. where talent and opportunity could meet without barriers, where innovation served humanity's highest potential. Outside the office windows, London's lights twinkled like stars, each one representing countless untold stories waiting to be discovered, countless dreams waiting to be fulfilled. The Mitchell Foundation would help tell those stories, just as Catherine had preserved the stories of her hidden collaborators, believing in a future where they would finally be heard. The Tech Vision boardroom had never felt so crowded. Beyond the usual executives, the room was filled with Catherine's former interns, foundation representatives, and legal advisors. Sarah sat beside Alexander at the head of the table, Catherine's recovered files displayed on the main screen. "The implications are clear," Sarah began, her voice steady despite the tension. Tech Vision's core technology wasn't just influenced by collaborative work, it was built on it. The AI architecture that made this company successful came from a diverse team of brilliant minds, led by Catherine Mitchell. Unknown? Janet Chen stood, her usual quiet demeanor replaced by fierce determination. "We weren't unknown. We were ignored, hidden. Some of us went on to start small tech businesses, teach in community colleges, repair computers in back shops, all while watching the technology we helped create make others wealthy." Alexander raised his hand for silence. "The question isn't whether we acknowledge this history, but how. Sarah, present the proposal." Sarah clicked to the next slide. The Mitchell Foundation proposes a complete restructuring of Tech Vision's intellectual property framework. First, we formally recognize and compensate all original contributors. She gestured to the former interns. Second, we establish a new collaborative innovation model that ensures this never happens again. Patricia Hamilton, who'd been studying the financial projections, spoke up. "The compensation package will impact our quarterly earnings significantly. Shareholders will understand that ethical business practices have long-term value," Alexander interrupted. "But there's more." He nodded to Sarah. "The files we discovered don't just document past contributions," Sarah continued. "They contain Catherine's complete vision for AI development, including applications we're only now beginning to explore. She and her team weren't just building technology, they were creating a framework for ethical, inclusive innovation." Emma, who'd insisted on attending with Oliver, raised her hand. "Show them the prototype, Mum." Sarah smiled at her daughter's enthusiasm. Emma discovered something in Catherine's notes, a theoretical model for AI that learns from diverse human experiences. "We've built a preliminary version." James Chen activated the display, showing a new kind of neural network that incorporated multiple learning patterns. "It's revolutionary," he explained. "Instead of imposing a single problem-solving approach, it adapts to different cultural and cognitive styles." The room buzzed with discussion as technical experts examined the model. Even Richard looked impressed. "There's something else," Sarah said quietly, drawing attention back. "In Catherine's final journal entries, she wrote about why she left." She glanced at Alexander. "She discovered her pregnancy just as the company was preparing to go public. The board at the time made it clear that a single mother with unconventional ideas about collaborative development wouldn't fit their corporate image." Alexander's face showed pain and dawning understanding. "She left to protect not just her team but our child, to prevent her pregnancy from being used against her work. And now," Sarah continued, her voice stronger, "that child is here to ensure her vision is finally realized. The Mitchell Foundation isn't just about education or opportunity. It's about transforming how we think about innovation itself." Grace, who'd been quietly observing, spoke up. "Catherine used to say that the best technology reflects the full spectrum of human experience. That's why she gathered people from different backgrounds, different perspectives. She believed true innovation requires all voices." The meeting continued for hours, diving deep into technical details, legal implications, and implementation plans. As evening approached, Richard called for a vote on the comprehensive proposal. "Before we vote," Alexander stood, "I want to add something. Effective immediately, I'm stepping down as CEO." Gasps filled the room. "Sarah will assume the position, with a mandate to implement these changes fully." "Dad, no," Sarah protested. "I'm not ready." "You are," he said firmly. "You understand both the technology and its human impact. You bridge worlds just like Catherine did. I'll remain as chairman, but Tech Vision needs a leader who embodies its new direction." The vote passed, though not unanimously. As the room slowly emptied, Sarah remained seated, overwhelmed by the day's events. Emma and Oliver hugged her tightly, while Grace held her hand. "Catherine knew this day would come," Grace said softly, pulling out an old envelope. "She left this for you, to be opened when you found your path." Sarah's hands trembled as she took the envelope. Inside was a letter, written in the same neat handwriting she'd come to know from the journals. "My dearest daughter, if you're reading this, you've discovered not just your heritage, but your purpose. I'm leaving now to protect what we've built, not just the technology, but the dream of inclusive innovation. Someday the world will be ready for these ideas. Someday you'll help make it ready. With all my love, your mother." As Sarah looked up from the letter, she saw her family gathered around her, her children, her father, her adoptive mother, and the extended family of innovators Catherine had brought together. Through the boardroom windows, London's tech district sparkled in the evening light, each building a potential partner in the transformation to come. The world was finally ready for Catherine's vision, and Sarah was ready to lead the way. 1 year later, the Tech Vision Tower looked markedly different. The once austere lobby now featured an interactive museum celebrating the company's true history, with Catherine's team prominently honored. Screens displayed real-time updates from community tech centers across the country, while diverse groups of students and innovators moved freely through the building's collaborative spaces. Sarah stood in her CEO office, formerly Alexander's, preparing for the company's annual innovation showcase. The event had been transformed from a traditional corporate presentation into a community-wide celebration of technological advancement. "Mum, we've got kids from 5 different centers demonstrating their projects." Sarah smiled, remembering her own journey from cleaning these offices to leading them. "And how's your project coming along? Grandmother Catherine's adaptive learning model works perfectly with our educational software," Emma beamed. "Oliver's class is already using the beta version." The office door opened again as Alexander entered, now more comfortable in his role as chairman and mentor. "The international partners have arrived. Janet's team from Singapore is particularly excited about expanding the foundation's reach in Asia. The past year had seen the Mitchell Foundation grow beyond their initial goals. Under Sarah's leadership, Tech Vision had not only acknowledged its collaborative history, but had made it the cornerstone of its future. The company's value had initially dipped when the truth was revealed, but had soon soared as their new inclusive innovation model proved remarkably successful. Grace wheeled herself in, her health much improved, carrying a familiar leather-bound journal. "I found more of Catherine's notes while cleaning out the old house. There's something you both should see." Sarah and Alexander gathered around as Grace opened the journal to a page dated just days before Catherine left Cambridge. "My dearest Alex, by the time you read these words, if you ever do, our child will be grown. I hope they inherit your determination and my dreams of making technology serve humanity. I'm leaving not because I don't love you, but because I must protect the future we've unknowingly created, both our baby and the revolutionary technology our team has built. Someday, when the world is ready, all of this will come to light. The truth has a way of emerging, like a flower breaking through concrete. When it does, I trust our child will help bridge the worlds we tried to join: innovation and inclusion, progress and purpose, profit and people. All my love." Alexander wiped his eyes quietly as Sarah squeezed his hand. Their relationship had grown stronger through their shared purpose of fulfilling Catherine's vision. "Mrs. Sterling," Margaret's voice came through the intercom, still adjusting to addressing Sarah by her new title. "The showcase is about to begin." The main auditorium was packed. Community center students sat alongside corporate executives. Janet Chen and other original team members occupied places of honor. In the front row, Oliver helped Grace with her oxygen tube, while Emma made last-minute adjustments to her presentation. Sarah took the stage, standing before a giant screen displaying Catherine's photograph alongside images of the company's transformation. "A year ago, we discovered that Tech Vision's success was built on a foundation of hidden collaboration," she began. "Today, we celebrate not just that history, but its continuation. Our community centers have produced innovations that are already changing lives. Our inclusive development model has generated more breakthroughs in 12 months than in the previous 5 years combined." She gestured to the diverse crowd. This is what my mother, Catherine Mitchell, envisioned. A world where technology serves everyone because it's created by everyone. Where a cleaner's daughter can become CEO, not as an exception, but as proof that talent exists everywhere, waiting for opportunity. Alexander joined her on stage as they unveiled the company's latest initiative, the Catherine Mitchell Innovation Campus, a sprawling technology education center that would offer free training and development opportunities to underserved communities. But perhaps our greatest achievement, Sarah continued, isn't measured in patents or profits. It's measured in stories. She pointed to Emma, who was helping a younger student with their presentation. It's measured in children who no longer see barriers to their dreams, in parents who can support their families while pursuing their passions, in communities that finally have a voice in shaping the technology that shapes their lives. After the showcase, the family gathered in Sarah's office. Through the window, they could see the sun setting behind the construction site of the new innovation campus. Emma was explaining her adaptive learning project to Grace, while Oliver drew pictures of what he thought the new campus would look like. Catherine would have loved this, Grace said softly, watching the children. All of it. Sarah touched the locket at her neck, then looked at Alexander. She did more than love it. She made it possible. She knew that someday we'd all find our way here. Together, Alexander added, watching his grandchildren with pride. Sarah's phone buzzed with messages from community centers across the country, sharing their success stories. On her computer, the latest iteration of Catherine's collaborative AI model processed data in ways that reflected the diversity of its creators. As evening fell over London, the Tech Vision Tower glowed like a beacon, its light reaching into communities that had once seemed far removed from the world of technology. Inside, a family born of love, loss, and rediscovery continued building bridges between worlds, guided by the vision of a woman who had dared to dream of a more inclusive future. In the end, it wasn't just about technology or business or even family. It was about the power of hidden talents finally revealed, of barriers broken down, of dreams passed from mother to daughter to grandchildren. It was about innovation that served humanity, just as Catherine had always intended. And in every line of code, every community center, every life transformed, her legacy lived on.